Hello and welcome to the Alexandra Wenman show. I'm so delighted to have Karen Newell back on here on the show. She's the co-founder of Sacred Acoustics and co-author of Living in a Mindful Universe. And Karen, how wonderful to have you back. How are you doing?
Alexandra, it's so good to see you again. I'm doing very well, thank you.
You look like you've got some lovely color in your cheeks. This lockdown is keeping you well.
Well, fortunately, we live in the country, and so we're out walking around the lake and doing gardening and things like that. So it's very
Beautiful. I
nice.
think we've all been connecting to nature, haven't we? And it's been so necessary.
Yes.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about expanded states of awareness and your work. How did you first become interested in this field?
Well, it happened just through kind of daily curiosity. I was always curious about what what there really was beyond our physical existence. I hadn't really glommed on to a particular religion or a particular belief system, but I was very curious and I was exploring what possibly could be the truth of humanity's existence, right? Those big questions. Why are we here? What is our purpose? And just my idle curiosity sent me searching through different spiritual texts and different even scientific texts trying to find the answers. And so I learned through these kind of explorations of texts that personal experience was highly important to truly understand the kind of concepts that I would be exposed to. And so I set upon a path of really trying to explore my inner world, as they say. And I learned all kinds of things about how to sense energy, how to use my dreams to learn information. And I really dived right into this concept of meditation without really much knowledge of how to do it, except that it was very important to learn how to meditate. And meditating was just the classic form was incredibly frustrating because my mind would just keep throwing all of these thoughts at me. I thought, oh, watch your breath, stay calm, your mind will go blank and you'll find nirvana, right? And not exactly how it
Not
worked
exactly.
because, yeah, inside my mind were all of these thoughts and I couldn't really get past them. And so I had to learn tools to really make some headway in all of this.
Do you remember, were you interested in kind of knowing more as a child? Were you an innately curious child that you remember?
Absolutely. I wanted to know the answers to everything. Why are we here? What is our purpose? And no one could give me satisfactory answers. And, they would try to give me answers, but nothing really felt right. And I never really accepted the answers I heard. I don't think anyone really has the answers. I don't pretend to have the answers. And so when they were offered to me, I couldn't accept them. And so it sets you on this path of seeking truth, basically, was my goal.
I love it. You're like one of those annoying children. But why? But why? I think it needs to, and we're still like that as adults, I'm sure. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the binaural beats and the brainwave entrainment technology and how you got interested in that. Because obviously you've explored many different facets of these techniques and spiritual awareness, but obviously sound and the binaural aspect has become a very important part of your life.
Well, sound really was one of the keys that helped me turn that corner regarding quieting the mind which is basically the basic goal of any basic meditation. Meditation has turned into this kind of broad kind of word. So I just want to be clear, I'm talking about just classic sitting quietly. And this was very challenging, and sound really helped me to stay seated for more than just a few minutes of frustration. And, silence really is the end goal, to really find inside of you what that is. But I used different types of sound as, I would say, kind of like training wheels to help me get started on the pathway. And it was particular kinds of sounds like gongs or tuning forks or crystal bowls. They all have this very beautiful kind of wah, wah, wah sound. And that was very kind of calming to the mind. And what I learned in my explorations of trying all different kinds of sounds to see what really got me there. It wasn't melodies and songs with lyrics for me. For some, that is the case. They can find that. But for me, it was these kind of wah-wah sounds. And I learned that binaural beats were created very intentionally out of digital frequencies to create that wah, wah, wah sound. And so when you analyze the frequencies of crystal bowls and tuning forks, you find that that wah wah really is designating that there's a binaural beat there. In the case of those instruments, it's very natural. But with Sacred Acoustics, the technology that we create is very precise, very mathematic. And on the one hand, it's not like regular music, but on the other hand, it is very precise, delivering very intentional brainwave frequencies to the listener so that they can achieve a quieter state of mind more easily than sitting silently, you know, for 10,000 hours like the Tibetan monks need to do before they're considered an expert. And here in the West, the Western mind, we need things a little quicker. We want results a little faster, and that can be a detriment, of course. But on the other hand, when you have a tool that can help you get there a little quicker, it keeps you focused. It keeps you interested in going further and diving deeper into what you end up finding when you start to listen to these kinds of recordings.
And what are some of the physiological effects of these sounds on people? Have you had people experience like physical changes and things like that?
Yes. So the physical changes that people have, there's a very broad range of effects. And so some people will feel tingling in their bodies. They might feel little twitches or unusual sensations here and there. And for us, we just describe that as the body is becoming profoundly relaxed. And then the mind becomes aware of maybe little energy blockages or something like that in the body. Another thing that happens every night when we go to sleep is kind of this form of sleep paralysis. So sometimes as people are falling asleep, becoming profoundly relaxed physically, their body might twitch unexpectedly. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing. So the tones really help to relax the physical body while your mind stays aware and alert. But other types of physical sensations that can happen, people sometimes find that they fall asleep more easily. Some people find they have more energy. There's a very wide range of effects, but the relaxation is very common. The idea that what we're doing is that the brain is normally at a beta state of awareness, that the electrical signal coming out of the brain as measured by an EEG calls the beta state roughly 12 to 30 hertz. And below 12 hertz are the more relaxed states. So 7 to 12 is the alpha, 4 to 7 is theta, and 0 to 4 is delta. So delta is when we're absolutely asleep. Theta is a little step up from sleep, but kind of not fully awake and alert. So that's a very meditative state. And alpha is a very focused, relaxed kind of state, just up from theta. And so these brainwave frequencies are delivering such binaural beats that bring us into those lower states of awareness. That state between awake and asleep is roughly 4 hertz. We call that the hypnagogic state. And that's where that body becomes incredibly relaxed, but the mind is still awake. Sort of like when you first wake up in the morning and you're remembering fragments of your dreams. And maybe if you move your body a little bit, you start to forget those dreams. So it's like that, except we're inducing it intentionally with these very specialized frequencies.
Do you find that this work has more of an impact when people set a specific intention before they go into working with the sounds?
Absolutely. And I found that case with regular meditation as well. If I mentally thought of a purpose for my meditation, or if what we call them is sound journeys, if I'm going to listen to a particular sound journey, there is much, much more effect when you apply that intention. And so some people, if they want to listen and just, I call it passive listening, they just listen and the body gets relaxed. But then in that state, if you have a particular question, a problem you wish to solve, a healing effect you want to activate, any kind of personal goal that you have when you're in that kind of hypnagogic state, that intention is incredibly powerful. And the way that I usually recommend forming these kinds of intentions is not with long, drawn out sentences of paragraphs, but for example, if you have a goal, I often use this example, if you're trying to sell your house and you want to sell your house, there's a lot of things that go into selling your house, but in the moment of your meditation or contemplation or whatever quiet time that you set aside, think of one word that would represent your goal after it had been achieved. So in the case of selling a house, it might be freedom, that now you have, something. It might be security for some other people. And so whatever it is for you, feel that feeling when you go into that meditative state, and with your thought and mind, you kind of connect it to your intention, to your personal goal, and then just generate that feeling of what you want to achieve. How do you want to feel when that goal has been achieved? So that not the goal itself, but how you want to feel when that goal is achieved. That's the sort of intention, that approach we have to intentions. So
have you got a series of recordings and things that people can access to get access to these sounds?
I do. Well, on our website, there's a free download available. It's a 20-minute Om recording, and many people get this recording and that's all they ever listen to because it's just enough for them. And so you can access that by going to sacredacoustics.com, look for free download, enter your email, we'll send that to you right away. And then we also have something I call the Whole Mind Bundle. Is very much a very wonderful place for beginners to start. Not just beginners with meditation, but beginners with binaural beats. So whether you're new to all of this or whether you already have a regular practice, the Whole Mind Bundle includes alpha tones, theta tones, and delta tones, all three of those lower states of awareness. So the listener can really get an idea of how they particularly respond. Every brain is different. Mm-hmm. Every brain wave, set of brain waves that can be measured on a person are like fingerprints. That's how unique they are from one person to another. And so we're all going to respond differently when we listen to these. But along with that passive listening and setting an intention, another very basic thing that I recommend people do while they're listening to these recordings is pay attention to your thoughts. And when your thought, or actually, it's not pay attention to your thoughts, it's allow your thoughts to exist. And when you realize your mind is wandering, that's the part to pay attention to you. The part of you that notices your thoughts. That's your inner observer. And these exact recordings and listening protocols that involve paying attention to that inner observer and finding that part of you inside that is not necessarily creating those thoughts, but is just watching those thoughts. And this, along with the recordings themselves, these protocols were used in a pilot study in a Manhattan clinical psychiatric practice. And the many kind of effects were noted. But what she did scientifically was use the state trait anxiety inventory. The psychiatrist gave this to all of her patients before they listened to the recordings, and then at 2-week intervals as they continued to listen. And she found that there was a 26% reduction in anxiety levels in those who added these recordings to their daily routine. And that is compared to the control group, who only saw a 7% reduction in anxiety with psychiatric therapy alone. And so this kind of shows you that while, incorporating these into a therapeutic practice can help, it can also help people at home who are just listening. And not only anxiety can be reduced, but all kinds of other transformational effects have taken place. In that psychiatric practice, for example, she had, Dr. Anna Yusum had one patient who had been in this toxic relationship for years and could not really remove themselves from that relationship. And I think a lot of us can identify with that. When you're kind of stuck in a relationship that isn't good for you, it's not necessarily easy to just end it and walk away. And in the process, when this person was listening to the recordings, somehow in their process, they were able to make a shift in that relationship and end that relationship once and for all. Others use them to help sleep at night, to help study. A medical student used them for sleep and study in her, and also reduced anxiety in this pilot study. So many, many goals can be achieved just by becoming more calm inside. And that's something that these recordings can do for many very effectively.
Have you had anyone have any really fantastical altered states of awareness under the influence of this?
Yes, absolutely. That can happen too. So it really just depends on the listener and what they're open to. So some people have had out-of-body experiences when they listen to our recordings. And sometimes it'll happen the very first time they listen, and it kind of unnerves them, like, whoa, just what happened? What just happened? And then they want to make it happen again. And then it's not so simple because they're expecting it. But other people have had, I would say, after the strongest effects happen after cumulative listening. So this is the case for, I believe, any kind of meditative practice that someone gets into, that after about, I would say, 1 to 2 years of regular practice, sometimes 18 months seems to be a time interval that people share with me. But anyone who sets on a pathway of personal discovery through some type of inner practice will find this to be the case. I don't think it's only the case with binaural beat recordings, but about one listener told me after about 1.5 years of listening, she started to have spontaneous out-of-body experiences while she was sleeping. And then a few months later, she happened to acquire our light body recording, which at the time was a brand new release. And so she had been listening to others of our recordings. And when she listened to light body, she had what she recognized as a Kundalini awakening. Wow. She felt the energy at the bottom of her spine start to rise up her spine. And as she was doing this, she was wise enough to know what was happening just from all of her knowledge that she had gained. But she'd never felt this feeling before. And so she felt it rising up her spine, and it came all the way up to right about, above her heart, right about, throat level. And she stopped it. It just unnerved her a little bit. And so she decided to, no, I'm not ready for this. And then when she let me know what happened. And after some conversation we had, she continued to experiment gently and really try to manage that Kundalini awakening. I'm aware of people who have such Kundalini energies awaken, and it's not necessarily all joy and bliss.
Yeah.
The joy and bliss that comes with it is what this listener was experiencing. But what often happens is it really throws you off your ability to live in the world, pay your bills, do your job, take care of your children. It can be a very distracting thing, but we've had all kinds of people use them to induce lucid dreaming states. They do use them to induce a state of being able to communicate with a departed loved one who maybe isn't, a child that they've lost. Sometimes people are able to connect. And so all kinds of beautiful things can happen depending on the listener and their goals.
And can you marry this work with other techniques and other tools as well?
Yes. I often recommend to regular meditators who maybe are interested in just changing up their practice to try listening while they're doing their regular meditative routine. And some will find that it gets in the way, and that's totally fair. But others will find that it helps them to go deeper than they've ever gone before. And they're amazed at the levels that they're able to reach that regular meditation in silence through different breathing techniques or whatnot maybe hadn't given them. But a particular technique that I really like to incorporate into listening to these types of recordings is the work that's done by HeartMath. And so HeartMath has recognized that there's an electromagnetic field that emanates from each and every one of our hearts. And it's doing this whether we intended to or even realize that it's happening or not. And this electromagnetic field expands and contracts based on your emotional state. Mm-hmm. And so feelings of love and harmony will make a huge electromagnetic field, and it actually seems to affect the people around you. So if you have a very magnanimous sort of feeling in your heart, you're affecting people in positive ways without even having to say a word. And yet, if you have a feeling of sadness or anger or something like that, you're not necessarily affecting people in positive ways. And HeartMath discusses a coherence technique that they recommend, and that's basically just the act of generating a feeling of gratitude in the heart. So this is similar to how we set intention. So it's like generating that feeling of gratitude is like setting an intention. And when people do this, this is when the brain heart rate variability, the brain wave state and the heart rate variability of the heart start to sync up. And so I often perform this generating of gratitude technique while I'm listening to these recordings. And I like to imagine my heart field expanding and contracting around my body as if into a bubble or a sphere while I'm listening. And this actually led to the inspiration for Heart Center, one of our most popular recordings, because it has you do that exact visualization and also connect with Earth and expand beyond the Earth. It's quite an expanding type of experience. But Heart Presence is another series of recordings created that has the listener imagine their breath moving in and out of their heart in different directions. And this is based on a Sufi heart rhythm meditation technique that I learned that's modified, for this purpose. And combining it with the sounds, in the case of Heart Presence, it's alpha frequencies, seems to help people really get in touch with that heart energy a little more readily. And I think because it helps quiet the mind, the thoughts that are going on that kind of affect us, our thoughts and emotions seem to work against us sometimes, and it really takes our concerted ability to manage those thoughts and emotions to really help them work for us in more positive ways. And so all kinds of techniques can be combined with listening to these recordings. They are by no means a method in and of themselves, although they can be used that way, just depending, again, on the individual goals.
Have you got some good case studies of people sort of changing their outer world by changing their perception through their inner world? I bet you've got loads.
Well, I've got them in my own life. That's for
you're the
sure.
guinea pig.
Yes. I'll tell you a funny story. And yes, other people also have noted. So but sometimes people will just start listening and they'll notice that other people will start telling them, you seem calmer, you seem happier. And then they realize, oh my gosh, I am. Others, one gentleman who started listening to our recordings, he was an alcoholic. And as he was listening over time, over many months, he stopped drinking. And so these are things, and then suddenly he had a job offer that he hadn't had before. So people are able to change their lives in remarkable ways. I remember I used to go to spiritual retreats involving different types of sound. And at the end of these retreats, the trainers would always tell us, when you get home, be careful because you're in this sort of altered state of consciousness. And when you get home, you will feel different. And you want to make sure not to make any huge life-changing decisions for at least 2 weeks. This is what they would tell us. Well, when I would get home from these kind of retreats, I did things like left my husband of 14 years. I left my job of 25 years. I did things like this. I made those decisions, those hard life choices in those moments of change, because that's when I felt bravest. And those decisions that I made turned out to be the correct decisions. And so I think that this kind of transformation is possible if we allow it. I know sometimes when I listen to these types of recordings or do different types of meditative practices, I will energetically feel different, but I don't notice it as much until, for example, I return to my job, with all of the people I see on a regular basis, but who have no inkling on spiritual matters. That's not the case anymore, but that was the case, 15 years ago. And that's when I would notice how much I had changed. And at some point you shift so much that you can't help but start to change your friends, start to change where you like to travel, you know, all of those things. And friendships are very interesting because that's a part of your outer world. And very often when people go through transformation, whether it's through, you know, addiction recovery or coming out of a belief system that maybe was oppressive, you know, whatever the transformation is, or spiritual retreats, you know, which is kind of the context we're talking here, people, they change without even realizing. And this is what's so amazing with any sort of, you know, it's funny you're asking me about the sound, and I'm very much a believer in the sound, but I'm also a believer in all spiritual practices, yes, that lead to personal growth. Because what I have found in all of the many courses that I took before I co-founded Sacred Acoustics is that very often we would be taught different techniques, and some of them worked and some of them didn't. And some of the people in the classes would be having amazing results out of the techniques, and others would not. And so I believe that we're all unique, and that all of us must go through, if you have this type of curiosity, must go through some type of trial and error, trying these different types of approaches to things in order to find that transformative effect. So I'll speak to something very simple, like what we talked about at the very beginning, this connection with nature. So many people have this ability to go out into the world and feel that connection with the beauty of nature, and others don't. And I found it very interesting on a, you know, in our COVID pandemic days of trying different television shows maybe we hadn't watched before because we have time. I watched the first of a series on national parks here in the United States. And I learned, I had no idea, that the reason we have national parks is because there was a gentleman back in the early 1900s, I forget the exact year when this happened, but it was Yosemite Park in California. He fell in love with this. He was literally having religious experiences, communing with the trees, the mountains, the rocks, and the animals. And he thought, through that spiritual experience he was having with this park, that we needed to protect this land for all humans to come in the future. And I learned that this was the very first time in humanity's history, I had no idea, that a piece of land was saved and preserved that could never be built on or farmed or mined or anything. And all over the United States, we now have national parks that are designated as beautiful locations for humans to go and enjoy. And I had no idea that these parks came from a spiritual experience. And so this is where, if that technique works for you to go hiking and feel connected, you don't need meditation. You don't need all of these other types of techniques. Find what works best for you. Others find it through sports. I was really amazed to watch, again, some clip on television about exercising and how it used to be that everyone would go to the centers and get on their little bikes, and the exercise teachers have turned into kind of spiritual leaders. And what I learned is that now people can do it from home. They get their own little bike and a television, a little screen is piped in, and they're not just telling them how to pedal. They're telling them how to feel good about their lives. They're telling them how to connect with their heart, how to spread that energy to the people around them. I had no idea that exercise had become such a spiritual experience for many. And so any way we can find that connection, and yes, sound helps those of us who want to meditate and go within and find that connection, quiet our thoughts. Another thing we haven't mentioned that sound did beautifully for me was to trigger emotional blockages that I had in my system.
You brought them up, did it? Yeah.
Emotions, and I find that happens with people who start a meditative practice as well, not just with the sound. But when you start to pay attention to the heart, especially when you start to imagine this thing, you think you're going to find this beautiful, loving, glowing part of you, and instead you find all the hurts you've ever felt and all the pain that you stuffed inside. And so all of this kind of can get us there. And if it's exercise, connecting with nature, sound, you know, relationships, the experience of losing a loved one can often bring us to that feeling of connection. And so all of these types of experiences can help us with
Because
that.
it brings it up, but also helps you heal it, doesn't it? I mean, it's all about deepening into that love. And when you deepen in, expand out, you deepen in even more, don't you? So it's as above, so below, as within, so without. You can't have one without the other, really, can you?
You really can't. And, love is another very strong interest of mine, because no one really taught me how that worked. I don't think anyone can really teach us how it worked. And yet I looked and looked. The Western mind, we want to find manuals. We want to find guidance and instructions. Do these things and you will find that. The Western mind is very dissatisfied with esoteric type of teachings, because they tell you, go find out for yourself. And so the Western mind needs to learn how to go find out for itself. And that can be done in many ways. But love seems to be the underlying answer. That is what I remember watching a special too on psychedelics, using psychedelics.
Oh, I watched that the other night. Yeah.
Well, there's a few of them. I don't know which one you saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one where they were talking about psychedelics being used in the setting of fear of death for terminal cancer patients. And what they find, they all have different experiences, just like with meditation. But it was the researcher who interested me most, because he was a hardcore scientist and he wanted to try the substance to see what it happened. And he said he was almost embarrassed to say that he learned that love is at the center of it all, because it sounds so cliche. But what we're finding is that this COVID pandemic is teaching us exactly that. While we're apart from all our loved ones is when we're realizing how much we love them. That absence truly does, that's the other, cliche, absence makes the heart grow fonder. It's actually true. And when we watch all of the tragedy going around our world from our homes, wondering, what can we do? We feel this compassion. We feel this wanting to be involved. And it's that love, that binding force of love, that the protests that are happening now over, I don't know when your listeners are going to hear all this, but there's protests going on all over the world because of U.S. racial injustice. And so many people want to solve this problem, not just the race who's being abused, but all of us who believe that all souls are equal, and that all souls deserve to, this life, liberty, and happiness, which is what the United States was founded on. We're not really living up to that goal. But this idea of love can bring us all home. This idea of love exists in each and every one of our hearts. That's what the heart does. And each of us, if we can find a way to generate that love from within, that's the love that we can directly manage. We can't manage other people's love of us. We can't manage the, riots and the sickness that's going on in the world, but we can manage our own heart field. And so this really brings me a sense of comfort, because the more that I can generate those feelings of gratitude from within, the more I know that that energy is being sent out into the world without me having to say a word. And I call that the ultimate golden rule. Generate love from within, and you're automatically loving those around you. And so for those of us who maybe that's a little challenging, it was very challenging for me at first. I didn't know how to generate feelings of gratitude. I knew how to generate thoughts of gratitude. And I had to really go back to memories of my childhood to recall moments. And for me, it was puppies, my interaction with puppies, because I love puppies. For everyone, it'll be something different. Children work really well. I have a 2-year-old grandson now, where just being around him, he has such delight in everything. Everything is a joy to him. And now that I have this expanded knowledge, I feel my heart around him, and it feels different. It feels pure. It feels sweeter. I'm feeling his heart. This is before all of the hurts and the, crazy decisions we make when we're children, based on information that isn't really complete. We decide things, we have emotional reactions, and those things stay with us. And so that's why when I was generating feelings in the heart, I turned to puppies instead of my daughter, because at that time she was a teenager. That
explains
was a
it.
little more challenging. So that's what I mean. You find what works for you in that moment, what brings you that joy, generate those feelings, clear out the emotional angst, and find that pure essence of who you truly are. I truly believe if each and every person on the planet would take the time to do this, maybe not even all of us, but half of us, whatever it takes. This is something that helps us as individuals and is kind of a no-brainer about what pretty much all mystics and even now scientists are telling us is at the heart of everything, and that's this force of love. And each of us can feel it, generate it, and become a part of it consciously. So that's a big, big interest of mine.
It is powerful. I was with a friend who's a fellow healer on the weekend. Like, we met up for a socially distanced walk, but we were walking through the park, and it ended up being really busy. It was almost like a mini festival. They were announcing lockdown sort of slightly lifting, but every man and his dog was out. And she said to me, Al, how do you cope? Because I can feel the trees, I can feel all the beauty, I can tune into all of that, but at the same time I can also feel all these people and all their pain. And I said, well, that is, you're living from the heart, you're feeling everything as an extension of you. And it is about, as we deepen into love for ourselves, we also need to deepen into love and compassion for our fellow human at this time, don't we? And I think that's it. That's why that's very telling in the fact that we exude energy in whatever state that we're in, and knowing that you can generate that energy out, you can choose how you're going to feel and send that out, is so empowering. It's really fantastic, because there's a heck of a lot of people on the planet right now that are terrified and that are afraid of this change we're all going through. I wanted to come back to the children too, Karen. Children and animals and even nature. When it comes to your Sacred Acoustics work, how do they react to the music? Can you use it with children? Do they benefit?
Yes, I mean, just like adults, they're unique. They will respond differently, but you want to be a little bit mindful of the age of the child. We did create 2 recordings specifically for babies. Oh. And they can also be used by all ages, but the first one it's called Cosmic Womb, and that recording has the fewest digital frequencies on it. It's actually a chime, a kashi chime that was made out of bamboo from the Himalayas, but it was created by our audio engineer who wanted his wife to have something to listen to during childbirth. And so he created this musical chime track and then embedded some very gentle 6 hertz theta frequencies into that. And when you listen to this, I actually used it when my daughter gave birth to my grandson 2.5 years ago. And it's so calming. It's just the most beautiful thing. And I could imagine it being played, in the neonatal ICU. My grandson was in there for a couple days. Nothing major, but for observation. And so what we noticed was they did play very gentle music to all of the little babies. And I was really hoping that they might try Cosmic Womb, but I didn't quite make that happen. But another recording that stemmed from the baby of our audio engineer was Sacred Lullaby, because he was, getting tired of listening to his baby cry. So he learned that taking his baby into the shower, hearing that shower sound would help calm him. So he took a shower sound, and his wife, who is a beautifully angelic singer, basically just singing to her baby, and some binaural beats. So shower sounds, singing, and binaural beats created Sacred Lullaby. And I know my daughter listened to that during her pregnancy because she had insomnia, and it really helped her sleep. And so now all 3 of them, she, her husband, and the child, will listen to it. And it even helps the husband from snoring as much. So,
oh my God, I need to play it.
Yeah.
I need to get this one because I am not sleeping right now. My husband is snoring like crazy. And I think a lot of people have been having their sleep disrupted at the moment. So this is a great one to recommend right now.
Yeah, it has singing on it. So for me, that doesn't help me sleep, but for some people it does. But yeah, we have whole delta and sacred sleep, and another one called divine love, which includes a yoga nidra spoken practice, which is known as divine sleep. And so there are several options for sleep that people can try. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're making me want to go and have an afternoon nap soon. Just wanted to come back to the topic of consciousness. And obviously you and your partner, Eben, who I've just had the pleasure of interviewing again as well, do a lot of work together in consciousness. In your experience, what is consciousness, and where is it anchored in us? How do we know what consciousness is, and how do we access it? Sorry, that was 100 questions in one, but
yeah. Well, I think of consciousness as our awareness, the part of us that thinks, feels, but that's just the first layer. It's that observer behind it all that I described earlier that I feel is really the consciousness of who we truly are. The authentic part of us is kind of beyond those racing thoughts. And that's the part of us that most of us aren't really aware of most of the time. And so, you know, coming up with different ways to get behind those thoughts and emotions is very helpful to solving some of the places we get stuck. And, you know, sometimes we can get stuck in those thought loops over and over. And I'll tell you, I'm no exception. So even though we've had, you know, I've had 15 years now of practice, and I can find the inner observer, and I'm equipped in emotional reactive states to kind of calm myself down and find, yet patterns still take place, and I still have, you know, volatility sometimes. So none of us is perfect. All of us are a work in progress. But the more that consciousness is really, another way to put it is that higher self, our subconscious, our underlying intentions we aren't really aware of. All of those things together for me make up consciousness. And as Eben came out of his near-death experience, realizing that the material brain does not create consciousness, but that consciousness exists fundamentally, this idea of consciousness, if you ascribe to this theory, means that every thought, feeling, attitude, behavior, intention we have is contributing to that greater collective consciousness we're all a part of. So to me, this brings a very sobering responsibility to each of us, because look around at our world, and if it's the case that we're living in a mindful universe, the title of our third book, and that our consciousness collectively is contributing to our unfolding reality, you know, how are we doing? Right now, it doesn't look so good. Now, what we have learned is that consciousness expands, consciousness grows through hardship and learning difficult lessons. And so Eben and I ascribe to the theory that this hardship that the entire world is now experiencing simultaneously with everyone else, every country is going through this, every person on the planet is affected somehow. We're going through a collective hardship that will hopefully, while it seems very chaotic and unnerving and anxiety-ridden right now, we are hopeful that this will help us to learn finally some incredibly important lessons for all of humanity to really move beyond some of the injustices and things that go on in our world without getting political. It's you know, it's disheartening now that when we talk about all souls are equal and consciousness is fundamental and we're all in this together, that somehow that has become a political statement.
Hasn't it?
Our world is very divided right now, and it seems very hopeless at times. That how could we possibly get to where we all feel united as one consciousness working together? And we are hopeful, again, that these rises in the two polarities, the extremists all coming out, is really a sign that the middle, that the majority of people who I believe do feel that all souls are equal, that, you know, we're all here to live a life of love and compassion for our fellow beings. I believe most people in the world feel something like that, as opposed to we're all different and need to kill each other. So hopefully we can come out of it.
I think there's many more like you and I, and I think we just have to hope for that. And like you say, you trust in the guidance of the heart, and trust that you can project that out into the world. Like I got shown this week of where we're at on the planet being a little bit like one of those merry-go-rounds in a park, that once it gathers momentum, it's a little bit hard to slow it down and stop it. And we're at the point where we're slowing it down and stopping it, and then we're going to spin it back the other way. But sometimes it needs to gather a bit of traction before it gets in the flow. So it all feels very hard at the moment. It all feels very hard and a bit tricky. And which direction are we going in? But, the collective effort will set us off on a new course for humanity altogether. And I think that's it. We're in that bit where it just feels a bit sticky and a bit awkward and a little bit hard. But I do believe that, this is the mass global awakening. And so many people are now, being transparent about their emotions, talking about where they're struggling, where they maybe used to bottle it up and slap the smile on their face and just get on with it. And it was a bit like stop the world, I want to get off before this happened. And I think it was much needed. Now we've got it's like waves of truth coming to the surface, isn't it? So yeah. Well, sorry, what were you going to say?
I just want to liken it to a personal hardship. So for example, when I was going through a divorce, the time leading up to should I or shouldn't I end it, the angst over it all, it seemed like the biggest problem in my world. It was so ever pervading every aspect of my life, like this COVID crisis and the resulting, stuff that's going on. Absolutely. Seems so insurmountable. And yet I made the decision, for whatever reason, I moved forward through it. During the time I was going through the actual divorce, having to split up the property, follow the legal channels, do all of that. Very, very challenging. I thought I would never get through it. It would never be over. And yet it ended. It ended. I got through it. Once you're past a hardship like that, it's very easy to go back and go, oh my gosh, no wonder I had to have this happen so that I could learn this. That's where I believe, agree that we'll be some distance in the future from now. I'll hesitate to put an exact time frame on it, but I believe we'll get there. And but it takes people like us, not us, you and me, but people who aren't the political leaders, people who aren't the corporate leaders. We can make a difference. And it's how we hold ourselves, it's how we vote, it's how we behave out in the community. Very often people will say, oh, you can't just generate love and think you're going to solve the world's problems. Well,
actually,
what if every problem that we were trying to solve was addressed from that loving energy with that compassion, and not the things that seem to drive us now, which is more profit and personal wealth seems to drive a lot of decisions. And I feel as though if we were all kind of bringing to our lives this feelings of love, empathy, compassion, yes, we want to generate it in ourselves, and yes, we want to demonstrate it to others, this can make a difference. We're not just sitting at home oming and chanting. We're actually bringing love to our actions. And so we never would suggest that people shouldn't act, but bring love to those actions and really start to change how we deal with people. And we see it happening right now through the COVID crisis.
That's it. Acting from love is, it's not about just sitting around and oming, but sometimes love is about saying no too. Sometimes love is about disagreeing with something that isn't right, that doesn't come from a place of integrity, or that doesn't suit the general populace, that is actually not great for everybody. So it's about being empowered love as well, isn't it? And active love
and tough
love, exactly like a mother would be with a child, teaching morals and values. It's absolutely that. Karen, you're such a wealth of knowledge, and again, like you and Eben, I could talk to you guys for days. But I just wondered if there's any parting words that you'd like to say to people before we finish up. And could you share all your website and everything as well with everyone?
Yes, well, sacredacoustics.com is where people can find out much more about the audio technology, and unitedinhopeandhealing.com is a series of free webinars that Eben and I are currently hosting every 2 weeks on Thursday. And what we're doing is we're inviting some of our colleagues from around the world who we would have been interacting with at conferences and meetings that we were planning to attend. So instead, we're inviting them to a conversation for about an hour every 2 weeks at unitedinhopeandhealing.com. And we have other webinars that are available as well. And all of that can be learned on sacredacoustics.com and unitedinhopeandhealing.com. And my parting words would really be that each of us, I'll just repeat, really does have a responsibility to play our part in this unfolding consciousness that we're all a part of. There's evidence all around us that show that it's real, that it's, we are connected, whether it's through getting a message from a loved one as they're departing this world, or whether it's dreaming about your baby before they're born. We know each other. Our souls are familiar with each other. And each of us needs to really start to embody this idea that we are part of a collective. As Eben often says, each of us is a facet on a diamond, a beautiful diamond that can't be beautiful without each and every one of our involvements. And so we often say, no soul left behind, regardless of your belief system, regardless of, how you view the world. Your heart and your love is who you truly are. And this is the baseline from which I believe we all can start afresh and anew in this new world we're creating together.
Absolutely beautiful. Karen, thank you so much from my heart for being here again. And just to say to all the viewers, thank you so much for joining us. We're sending you so much love and hope you're all hanging in there. And do check out Karen's work and check out Eben's work as well. And let's drive this world forward in love together. So much love, my darling. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.